Hello class. This lecture is going to be a little different from this week's text, which goes over elections and political parties. What I'm going to talk about is the ideology behind our current political system and political parties. The power of ideas is useless to send an army against ideas. George Brands here. So what is an ideology? What are these ideas here? The science of ideas, ideology. So these are packages of beliefs, a philosophy about how politics works, how it works in real life, and how it should work. These are guiding theories to our real world politics, how things really happen. So they offer an analysis of how politics works and philosophy, a value of how it should work. So the American history and American system comes from a liberal ideological tradition. This is what would be termed as classical liberalism. And our current politics are variants from this classical liberal position here. Both the modern left and modern right, Democrat and Republican parties, conservative, liberal, come from this liberal tradition. So what is classical liberalism? This is, began in Europe around the 1500s and really was strengthened and became to fruition in the 1700s. And this is the idea that individual citizens have rights, rights that are given to them from birth. Here we come from John Locke, and in our Declaration of Independence, that each individual has a right to life, liberty, and property. And they are born with this right. It can't be given or taken away by aristocratic governance or anybody else. You combine this individual rights to life, liberty, and property with representation, meaning these individuals have a right to have a say in who is in charge of them, who elects them. This is a very powerful idea that spreads and has continued to spread throughout the world. The second part of classical liberalism was brought to us really by Adam Smith in his book The Wealth of Nations in 1776, actually. And this is the idea that free markets, you have this individuals, and if they're allowed to make their own choices, businesses, everybody allowed to do what they think is in their best interest, their rational interest, it would lead to the most productive and wealthy, and they would argue happy society. That the lure of wealth and the fear of poverty, these would lead people to seek the most productive use of their time and efforts, and would lead to prosperity. And here is where we see a tremendous amount of growth. The countries that follow this liberal tradition, England and United States, France, and other parts of Europe, they became very wealthy. This capitalist liberal society grew very powerful and really dominated the world. And now we're going to start to see how classical liberalism has branched out a little bit here. From the roots of classical liberalism, we'll go into modern liberalism or leftism here. So these modern liberals are like, yes, a lot has been accomplished with capitalism and classical liberalism, but we see things that can still be improved. Like negative liberty, the protection from government, from abuse, meaning we have rights to life, liberty, that's great. But now we want to do more positive liberties, making sure people have more opportunities, protection from things like hunger. And so these modern liberals would think that it's okay to have a government that will go in and have programs to support, to reduce inequality, to try to reduce poverty, and the government has more of a role. And this, of course, would be more challenge the status quo. So these modern liberals, they favor capitalism, but they do acknowledge that capitalism does have market failures. The market isn't perfect, and we need a mixed economy of government and free markets to make a just society. And these modern liberals are willing to use collective action to change, to help make a change in policy and in society. They're open to government intervention. Now we'll get into modern conservatism. In many ways, modern conservatism really follows classical liberalism. A great faith and belief in representative democracy, free markets, and individual rights, free individuals to make their own choices. So these modern conservatives favor limited government, small government, which means low taxes, free markets, and economic and personal liberty. So they say, yes, we want people to have opportunity, but the government already provides that. We need a system where people can freely exchange ideas and products, and that this is pretty much set up so the government kind of get out of the way and let people make their own decisions. And they would argue that small government and low taxes benefit even the most disadvantaged because a capitalist society, all boats rise. More products will be made, more inventions like the iPhone. Everybody's life will get better in the long run. They would argue that government programs to help the poor and the needy might actually be counterproductive. They soften the consequences of failure, with the idea being that failure motivates people to keep on trying to improve their lot. And that there might be unintended consequences with government action. Like high taxes may make or rich people become less productive, less incentive to go out there and create a new business. And they might say poor people might get welfare and then not look for a new job or something like that, to where they wouldn't improve their station in life. So a short little video by Milton Friedman called iPencil. I encourage you to watch it. He's a classical liberal, you might say a modern conservative libertarian, which I'll get into in just a second here. Another part of modern conservatism is the idea that tradition and experience and authority are important. So they're less willing to favor rapid change than a modern liberal or a classical liberal might be. Or, change and improvement's good. They'll have more of a respect for customs and tradition that have come before, almost viewing society as an entity in itself with a past, present, and future. And that if you're going to change it, that these parts of society are there for a reason. They were built and became a culture or a custom for a reason, and that only incremental reforms should be tried. So they'd be concerned about rapid change. There's branches of modern conservatism. In the United States, we have a religious bent to conservatism, a Christian side, which actually would go against some other important philosophies in classical liberalism or libertarianism of free markets and free people. These would think that, the government should maybe have a say in morality, to follow more of this Christian beliefs. So you can see how they could butt heads here. But they would also agree that there should be respect for traditions. And in this way, more Christian traditions. Christian Judeo. Then another branch of modern conservatism would be the libertarians or Tea Party. These are people that really feel that the smaller the government, the better. The government should stay out of the way and people's rights should be not abridged. They shouldn't be restricted. So Ron Paul was a famous libertarian. And the libertarian will have policies that kind of many on the modern left and many on the modern right would support, such as they don't think drugs should be illegal. They might be pro-abortion, but they would think there shouldn't really be welfare programs either. So here's a little visual that shows how the tree of classical liberalism grows into branches of modern liberalism and modern conservatism. So just going over the words, in the United States, liberal means left, means modern liberal. Conservative means, modern conservative, or, more of a classical liberal. Other places in the world, liberal will mean like what you would call a modern conservative, or a classical liberal who would believe in less intervention in markets and less government control. So it's a little bit different here in the United States. Universally, the terms left and for bigger government, social reform proponents, and the right would be those against changing society or adding more government structure. So left, right, those are more universal terms. But as I like to emphasize, these both come in America system. They both come from the liberal, classical liberal tradition. So here's, these ideologies are really powerful because they can answer a lot of big questions. And here I just have a couple here. Do you think that individual liberties should trump or be more important than broader social purposes? So an individual's right to be taxed and not have the government mandate things he does, is that more important than trying to make society more equal in terms of economic money? How would a classical liberal answer that question? How would a modern liberal answer this question? Or a traditional conservative or a modern conservative? How should social change come about? What would a modern liberal say about that? And what would maybe a modern conservative? And how should inequality be addressed? How would both sides address that question? So these ideologies really give us a basis to try to answer these. And last thing to talk about is liberalism has been challenged ever since it's been around. Challenged by socialism, which quickly is where the government has a lot more control over the private sector. The government takes over industries, takes over transportation, maybe electricity, or even more so, maybe takes over food production. So a lot bigger government, but still there will be a fair amount of free markets going on, at least in some sections. Then you have communism. So this is going to be where a total control, where the government pretty much owns everything. There's no private property. Everything's kind of supposedly divvied up, so everybody has an equal chance to do what they want and an equal means taking care of food and shelter and such taken care of. Mostly what we've seen in the world is socialism. Communism was mainly tried in about 20 or 30 years in China. Now the government there has like near total control, but in terms of controlling the market, there is more of a free market aspect to it. And of course, Russia with the Soviet Union tried full-fledged communism for several years before it fell apart in 1989. Then we have another challenge to liberalism, which is fascism, which was really going to be like these liberal ideas of individual freedom and having rights, each citizen having rights to choose what they want, was pretty much the opposite. The government's going to be in control and we're going to decide what's right. And it would have a major bent toward, trying to preserve our traditions. And of course, with the Nazis and the fascists in Italy had a major racist bent to it. And modern environmentalism is very wary of rights, individual rights, and free market rights that would infringe on the environment and cause harm to it. And lastly, what became very big after, of course, 9/11 was modern Islamism, a radical form of Islam that views liberalism and liberal rights as a total infringement on their Muslim community and something that needs to be stopped. So, hope you enjoyed this section, and have a great rest of your day, class.